Changed my idea because I'm doing this project for both classes, and so I had an opportunity to redesign my idea and kind of take it a little bit further. So I can't remember if I showed this to you or not, but this is my kind of what I came up with in the end. So I kind of took that Indian vessel that I thought was really beautiful, and I sort of expanded it vertically because I want my vessel to have a lot of space in it. Because I do want to put quite a number of things in it. And I kind of continued with the concept of external forces happening this year, and then internal forces would be on the inside of the pot. So externally I have, and this is something that is very personal to everybody, even though it was happening externally, is the election that we had this year and all of the things that happened around the election, including the insurrection and then the final election, and then the very first female vice president, and just a lot of really powerfully potent historical things happen around this election this year. So I definitely want that to be part of the outside of my vessel, and obviously this is Trump and this is Biden. I might not make it this cartoony, this is just a drawing to kind of say this is what I want to put on my pot. I might do some low relief carving and just put that around there. And then of course these are the coronaviruses kind of floating around in space. Pretty literal, but I think that's a good thing for this project because we're teaching someone in the future about us. So if we're too abstract, then it's not going to be a teachable thing. It's going to be kind of confusing. And then on the other side of the pot, or maybe even around it, these are just people on their computers, and these little rainbows kind of represent communication, and that it's not all bad, right? We're trying to stay connected, and we love each other, and we're trying to, just find some semblance of, normal life within our virtual environment. And can you imagine too, if we didn't have the virtual, how would we be dealing with this if we didn't have the computers to help us communicate with each other? So that's an interesting question. And then everything that's going to go inside my pot is all very personal and internal, right? What am I thankful for? I'm thankful for you, right? I'm thankful for you guys, my students and my coworkers. I'm thankful for my son and my family and nature, and I'm going to throw some holidays in there, pretty literal things, and then objects too, like toys and pacifiers and maybe cooking utensils and things that were important to my survival at home this year. So this is my idea. Now, I'm going to teach you how to start this idea, but let's talk about what we're going to learn in terms of techniques for our form. So I'm going to teach you how to work with wet slab. You've already learned how to make a slump mold because that's what we use for our bowls, but I'm also going to teach you how to use this, the slab to create a free form as well, which is something we haven't done yet. So I'm going to show you those two things today. Or you can do coil and pinch, which is something that we've done a little bit of with the figure, but we've actually not built a hollow form yet, except for our mug, with this technique. So we're going to practice this too. So this would be free form and paddle technique, or both. So I'm actually going to show you how to make a free form bottle, and the top of the bottle is going to be pinch. So I'm going to show you how to work with both of those. So the very first step is to roll out that slab. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Of course, the tools that you need are really simple, basic tools that you've already collected for ceramics. You might be asking, well, what size is this going to be, Ms. Renninger? Please do not make a giant time capsule or a giant bottle, okay? We don't have enough clay and kiln space to handle that. So they have to be relatively, small. So I would say don't make your time capsule or bottle bigger than like 12 inches on one side. All right, so slab. Don't remember if I've taught you how to build a slab yet, but we've got our wet clay. And we're going to wedge it, which is really important for slab work. We want to get all those air bubbles out of there. And we want all our clay to be sort of like evenly moist. Okay, next thing I do for slab is I try to make my form as uniform as possible. Do this way. So I just drop it on the table, compressing the particles. Can you guys see me? You have a good view of my table and everything? Okay, good. Now for this project, you guys, it's really important that you follow the technique and the steps that I'm teaching you. And we're gonna make this fully finished, right? So that means we're really thinking about the stages of ceramics. The wet stage, right? And then the stage where we're drying it a little bit so that we can continue to build on it without it cracking or getting too dry or flopping over. And then the stage where it gets leather hard and we've carved into it and we've made it really, all the detail on the outside is all carved into it during the leather hard stage. And that we're going to dry it safely and get it fired, glazed, and fired again. I'm going to try to take it through the whole process. Now, if you're going to stay as a distance learner, I'm going to do my best to just have you drop your piece off. I'll fire it for you. And we'll have to figure out the glaze. I'm not really sure if I can let you glaze it or if I'm going to have to ask you to do acrylic after it's bisqued. We'll figure that out later. Okay, so for slab work, I have this really nice kind of like pancake that's shaped kind of like a rectangle. I take my rolling pin. If I don't have a rolling pin, I can use a cup. And I'm going to throw it down in a different spot. And there's something called throwing a slab too. So when you pick it up, you just kind of like stretch it out a little bit, kind of like pizza dough. You never want to roll it more than twice before you flip it and move it again, or it's just going to stick to the table. So right now I'm making a bottle form using a slab. So I'm just showing you how to make the slab part. And this is going to be the walls of my bottle. So I want it to be kind of long this way and tall. So I pick it up and I'm just going to kind of stretch it out. Maybe roll it out in the corners a bit so I can have a nice geometric shape. If you notice any air bubbles or air pockets here, just take a sharp tool and pop them. Just kind of push on it. Now you don't want this wall to be too thin, especially if you're going to carve into it. So I'd say maybe like 1/2 inch thick. Now, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually put a texture on here, even though I might carve into it later. I'm going to put a texture on it because I love texture and the glaze loves texture too. So you might want to think about your cultural heritage. Obviously I'm not Japanese, but this is something, if you were, you could take a sushi roller. That might be kind of fun. Or anything from your culture. This is not from my culture either. This is from Pakistan. I've showed that to you before. Or walk around your house and look at the objects in your life and maybe just use something from your environment. So the neat thing about rolling a texture into something is that you can always smooth it out later. Or if I wanted there to be some texture around my figures, I could smooth out a place to carve my figures and leave the negative space texturized. Throw some of this texture on there. These are like my 3 favorite things this year is the sushi roller, the Pakistan textile block, and that flower brick. So if I wanted to maybe have a smooth texture to carve a design, I could just take my rib tool and I could just smooth it. It's so much easier to do this while your slab is wet than wait until afterwards. You have to carve it all in, and it just works better this way. So maybe I put some figures in this space here. Okay. Now you really have to babysit this because you still need to bend it to make the bottle. But it can't be this floppy or it's just not going to hold its own weight. So I would find a board and I would put it on the board and I would babysit it until it gets to be the right consistency to stand up and bend. And like a cooking show, I'm going to show you the next step. So I'm going to put this aside and let it dry. Now there's a chance when you guys are working that it's going to dry out too much and you're going to ruin that piece of clay. That's okay. If that happens, you just have to start over. And that happens to a lot of clay artists. It's not a big deal. You just have to be kind of okay with it. I didn't create that smooth surface here, but I could still do that even though it's dried a bit. It's just harder. You guys can see the difference here. So this piece, you can see it's stiffer. It's still bendable, but it's perfect actually. So I'm going to carve this. And you can see as I'm carving, it literally is coming off in these like sheets of clay. And I can refine that and define it later. Okay, so now I'm going to take a ruler, and this is really the fun part here. I'm going to build my form pretty quickly. Chop off the base. I'm not going to cut the sides yet because I'm not sure how much I'm going to need. And I'm going to add more clay to the top too so I can finish off my bottle form. Might want to keep these just in case. I could use them for something else. Okay, so now that I've done that, I need to make a base. I should have actually made a base for that before when I made my slab. So that's good to know. So when you make your other slab, I want you to make a base to go with it so that they're the same dryness. This clay is actually kind of dried out, so this is perfect for the base. So some things I kind of expect from you guys towards the end of the first year of ceramics. This year's different because you weren't here with me and the learning is different, so my expectations are a little different, but I do expect that you understand the nature of clay at this point, that you understand that you can work on it in different ways at different stages. Okay, so this is going to be the base for my slab bottle. And I might want to make it a little thicker than my walls just because it's more of a support. Okay, so now that I have this base, it might be kind of fun to texturize it too. And if you guys have any questions, please throw out those questions. Oh, good question, Christina. No, there's no whipped for today. You're just watching my demo. Okay, so you're going to take your slab and you're going to figure out, you bend it carefully because maybe yours is too dry. You know, it's like yours is going to be a little different than mine. So I'm going kind of slow here. If you're a little worried about it being too dry, I would dump a little water on it before you bend it and let it sit there for 5 minutes and let it kind of absorb. So let me show you a different angle of this. The arm of this is not the best here. So now I'm figuring out how far I can overlap it. And this would be a good use of the Lazy Susan, so give me a sec. Now these other forms here that I've been working on. I'll just move them over for now. Okay, so now I can rotate this around and lift this up. So I'm going to close this off and probably chop off one side of this just so that I have one that's straight. I wish this arm was longer. Okay, and then I'm going to figure out where does it overlap. And then before I attach it, I'm going to score it. When your piece is drier like this, you really have to score it deeper and you have to attach it better. So cross hatching on the outside and then on the inside. Okay. And then I'm gonna get that nice and wet with my sponge and maybe let it sink in a little bit. I haven't attached it to the base yet because I don't know the diameter yet. So I'm going to attach this first. Overlap, and then I'm just going to compress, which is just pinching, sealing the seam here. This is a really quick way of building a pretty tall form. You might want to make it so that you could, wide enough so that you could put your hand inside. You guys were learning how to throw right now, you could be throwing these forms. And then of course you're going to have to spend some time really cleaning up the inside of this, but I'm not going to do that at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to take my paddle. If you guys don't have a paddle, you could use anything really that's hard. You know, you can get a piece of wood from the garage or a cup or something from the kitchen. Okay, and if you have any cracks or anything that kind of opens up, I would spend a little time and put some Band-Aid coils in there because you want to make sure those areas don't open up later. So Band-Aid coil is when you take wet clay and you just roll a tiny little coil like that, and you score your surface and you score the coil and you get it wet and you just kind of squish that Band-Aid coil into the area that feels fragile, and you just kind of fix it. That's why I call it a Band-Aid. And then really compress it in there. You can paddle it, which compresses it even more. And then you can retexturize it with that rib tool. Okay, and you would go around, you probably even want to put a Band-Aid coil up the inside seam, inside and maybe outside seam of your attached area here. I have a feeling that this demonstration is going to have two parts to it. So I'm going to run this Band-Aid coil up the side here. And this is just extra support for that seam, which you need when you're working with clay that's dried a bit. You need extra support. So you don't want that to open up in the firing, or, you know, as your piece is sitting in the dirt over time, right? It's water could seep in, so you just need these to be pretty strong forms. Okay, so what do I do next? Well, I'm going to attach this to the base. So first thing I'm going to do is clean this up. Get some new paper here. Compress your base, and then figure out where you want to put it. Now this is the point at which you can decide, is it going to be symmetrical, or do I want to paddle it into a different form? Depending, of course, on how fragile your wall is. If it's pretty getting kind of dry, you don't really want to paddle it too much. All right, I'm going to cut the base off. And then I have to, what I would do is I would flip this over like that. I really wish there was a better solution to this camera here. I'm going to peel this off, and then I'm going to score it. Now you can tell that the wall is much thinner than the base, which is not a bad thing. Score it up good. Score this. Clay takes time. It's going to take you guys time to make this piece. And time, and babysitting, and effort. Paddling is just the best way to really attach things, because you're compressing those particles together and they're really becoming one. Scraping, and that's not, that base is nice wet clay, so it's going to seep right into your scored marks. Clean the rest of that up later. All right, so now we have a bottle form. Almost looks like a bottle, right? It's got the label and all the texture around it. I'm going to clean this up some more, and then I'm going to probably re-wet it so that it stays nice and moist, because I don't want it to really get any drier than it is. Spend a little time making this form kind of perfect, the way that I want it to be. Not perfect in my eyes as Miss Grunninger, your teacher, but perfect in your eyes, the way that you envision it to be. Okay, now there's a seam right here that we also need to make sure is closed. So I'm going to take my scraper and scrape up. All right, so what is the next step? Because obviously this is just the bottom half of the bottle. Like, how do I make the top part? I think what I'm going to do is save that for part 2 and show you how to make, start building up your coil vessel if you want to make a time capsule, because this is not the ideal technique for a time capsule because the slab would be too big. I mean, you could try if you're feeling ambitious, and you could really do any form with this technique. It's just you're going to need a gigantic slab to make a bigger, flatter form. So I'm going to wrap this up. I'm not going to put too much water on it because I don't want it to get floppy, but I'm going to put some water on it so that I can keep it from drying out. Some water on the inside and double bag it. All right, the next thing I'm going to show you is how to build. I'm going to try to do this in a quick period of time here. How to start your time capsule vessel. In the next class, I'll show you how to put this lid on, and also how to use a slump mold for your slab, which you probably already know how to do anyways because you already made your bowls that way. All right, so for this I also need a little slab for my base. So now I'm going to actually be working on my time capsule. This will be the beginning of my time capsule. Now you might be, at this point, if you're confused, you're like, I don't know which one to do. She's showing me all these different things. It's up to you. I'm just showing you multiple techniques, and you get to decide which one works for your form the best. And if you're not sure, then show me your drawing and ask, and I will give you some advice. Coiling technique is a little bit more laborsome. It takes more work, but you have a little bit more control over your form. So if you have a form that's more organic, like Zoe's fish, I would definitely coil it versus slab. If you have a very geometric form, then slab would be better. In fact, let me show you what's coming up here. I took a cardboard box and I slab molded around that box, and I just took it off just now, so it needs a lot of cleanup work, but I got a slab form pretty quickly, and so I can clean this up and I can add to it with pinch or more slabs, or there's just a lot of opportunities with that slab technique. All right, so here's my base. I'm gonna take this paper towel roll and I'm gonna use it to trace a nice round base. Now, if we start hybrid this month, and you're going to be participating in this, you're only going to get to work on your clay pieces 1 day a week at school. I'm not going to ask that you take your clay pieces back and forth from home to school because they're pretty fragile. Once you really start working on them, they're kind of too fragile to be carrying back and forth. So keep that in mind in the size that you decide to make this. Okay, so now we're going to be building with coils. I've already taught you how to make coils, but we're going to do this again. I'm going to take a piece of clay, and my form kind of goes up, but it kind of goes out and in and out and in. So I'm going to have to put the coils on and really do a lot of paddling to make sure that I don't have enough clay there. Make sure that my coil is nice and thick so that I can shape it as I go up. All right, so when I build with coils, I like to build really thick coils because then I can have clay to pinch up. Now, you don't want to build a pot with tiny little coils because it's just going to take you forever to build that form up. So that's why I call this technique coil and pinch. I want to make sure this goes all the way around. Okay, so I roll out a pretty thick coil, and then I roll it a little bit flat so that my wall is kind of the same thickness. Not too flat, it's still about almost an inch thick. And then I take my base and I score. And then I do like a crosshatchy score. This is pretty wet clay. With this technique, you're working with really wet clay. You're not, at some point it will be drier, but I will talk about that later. And then you want to score the bottom. So this is the flat side, and this is the curved side. So you score the bottom of the curved side. All right, now this is key. When you pick your coil up, with your left hand, you want to pinch and really compress. You're like zippering that coil to your base. Pinch, pinch, pinch. And this makes your coil a little bit longer, obviously, because you're pinching it skinnier. As you go around, try to be like a machine about it. When you get to the end, you want to cut that, and then you want to score. Anywhere you attach, you score and slip. Don't get lazy about that step, or you're going to have a big crack right there. Okay, so this is the stage at which I want to get a board, and I want to put it on a board because you do not want this to stick to your table. It's already getting close. Get a piece of paper, so it doesn't stick to your board. And then at this stage, we want to start attaching. So I'm going to take my finger tip, and I'm going to put my hand on the outside for support, and I'm going to scrape down. I really want to scrape into it and grab that clay and seal it. You shouldn't see that seam when you're done. And then you want to do the same for the outside. Take your finger and really like fold it over that seam and just squish it. You're making these two pieces of clay one piece. So you do not need to post a whip today. Today was just about watching me start these pieces. Okay, so here's what I want you to kind of memorize in your brain. This is not finished. This is not a finished looking form. This is step one. All I've done is attach the coil to this base. It's not pretty yet. It's not the right form yet. It's just functional. I've got clay there to move, okay? And I've attached it well. So the next step is to pinch. So you have to really look at your form and you have to say, does my form go in right now or does it go out? If it goes out, then I need to pinch out. If it goes in, I need to pinch in. So I'm looking at my form, and I'll probably add a foot later, so it needs to go out. So I'm going to be like a machine. I'm going to pinch up. I'm going to pinch up, and I want it to be about 1/4 of an inch thick, especially at the base here. And I'm trying to do this as evenly as possible, especially if I'm going for symmetry. A vessel that's the same around. Very easy for things that go out to get away from you, and all of a sudden you have this gigantic form. Okay, don't let that happen. Okay, if it starts to get crazy and flop out, then talk to me and I can help you get it under control. This would just be step one here, and I realize that class ends in a minute, so I'm going to stop here and call this just part one of this demo. All right, any other questions?